My name is Naomi. I'm 30 years old. At the family dinner, they called me the poor one. Still taking the bus? My sister pointed and laughed, full of pride. But then my mother suddenly froze, her eyes locked onto my neck. Is that the limited edition diamond necklace worth $59 million? She stammered. My sister turned to look and fell silent. The entire table went dead quiet, as if an invisible bomb had just gone off in the middle of dinner. I simply smiled and said, "Oh, this? It's just an ordinary piece of jewelry." Before I share the rest of this story, can I ask you something? Where in the world are you listening from? Honestly, I'd really love to know how far this story can travel. Now then, come with me and let's continue. Golden Terrace, the venue for my family's annual gathering, looked exactly the same as every year, lavish, suffocating, with the overpowering scent of Chanel No. 5 mingling with oyster sauce, making the whole place feel like a masquerade party pretending to be dinner. As the glass doors slid open, a burst of high-class laughter rang out like someone had just pressed play on a perfectly rehearsed family stage show. I hadn't even fully stepped in when my sister's voice cut through the air, clear, cold, and loud enough for the entire table to turn. "Still riding the bus, huh? Poor thing." She turned to her husband, a slick-haired man with a stone-cold face and the kind of eyes that know exactly why they're in love, and giggled like she had just cracked the joke of the night. "She's not wrong. Still doesn't even have a car. Pathetic." The sneer spread like bacteria. From the left side of the table, my uncle nodded along, glancing down at his Rolex as if to check if it was time to mock the poor relative. My aunt pushed up her Gucci glasses and let out a laugh like someone casually amused after afternoon tea. My mother simply let out a soft sigh, just enough to signal a mix of weariness and embarrassment, then leaned toward Aunt Ba and whispered, "At least she hasn't done anything to disgrace the family, yet." I pulled out my chair but didn't rush to sit, just quietly placed my bag down by my feet. The long table seated 12, and the ceiling lights reflected off the glossy wooden surface, making the wine glasses shimmer like crystal. Everyone at that table sat like they were attending their own press conference, each minute another monologue on success, wealth, and social status. My sister sat in the center, her off-shoulder black dress glittering under the light, a chunky necklace clinging to her skinny neck like it was screaming, "I'm rich, look at me." Her husband Ethan, if I remembered right, adjusted his Hermes tie as if preparing to deliver a report on this month's stock market. "Kevin, my son, just got into Goldman Sachs," my uncle declared like a proud news anchor. "In the New York office, no less. Not some random branch." Kevin offered a modest, calculated smile. "It's just an internship, not a full-time position yet." But my uncle wasn't about to let the spotlight go. An internship at Goldman is already a huge step. Not everyone gets in. You need a stellar resume. The interviews are brutal. I looked at Kevin, white dress shirt, gray suit, Tag Heuer watch, every detail on him silently shouting, "I was chosen." I used to wear shirts like that too, back when I walked into my first startup interview. But no one ever mentioned me. Because I didn't brag. And I never quite fit the mold of success this family worships. "Emily's launching her own coffee chain in Beverly Hills," my aunt chimed in, beaming like her child had just brought home Olympic gold. "It's fusion coffee, Asian flavors mixed with modern cuisine. Totally exclusive." I glanced at my cousin scrolling through her phone, her rhinestone-covered nails so long she couldn't even hold her glass properly. "She's brilliant," my aunt went on, unprompted. "Next year, she's opening a franchise in Tokyo. The Japanese love American brands." I nodded faintly, not out of admiration, but because I'd grown numb to this kind of conversation. Each sentence another invisible metal passed around like confetti. My mother gave a thin smile, then sighed. "Well, at least she's not bringing shame, even if there's nothing to be proud of, yet." I held my glass of water and gently tapped it against the table to cover the sound of my breath. They didn't know I had just signed a $400 million contract last week. They didn't know my name had been listed in the top 30 under 30 by a magazine they still leafed through at the salon. They didn't know because I never told them. but also because they had never wanted to know. Every conversation in this family has always had only two roles, the successful one to be praised, and the other to be trampled down as a backdrop. And I had always been the perfect backdrop, the quiet little sister, still riding the bus, still someone no one remembered what she actually did, still wearing unbranded button-ups. The less I sparkled, the easier I was to forget. I remembered once, at a family gathering, my sister stood in a circle of boyfriends and said, "My sister studies IT, but like, the kind that just fixes computers." They all burst into laughter like my job was at a copy shop. I didn't say a word, I just walked away. But that night, I stayed up coding until 3 a.m. Not to prove anything, but to make sure I'd never have to bow my head to anyone again. I also remembered last year on my mother's birthday, I gave her a small gift, a leather notebook imported from Italy. She opened it, glanced at it, then pushed it aside like some free gift from a bank. "Why didn't you get me Chanel lipstick like your sister did?" she asked. I smiled and nodded. But that night, I wrote the first line in that notebook. "Remember every scar. Not for revenge. Just so you never forget." Now, looking at the dinner table filled with laughter, boasting, and mockery, I no longer felt angry, just distant. They spent their whole lives chasing the same things: house addresses, car logos, handbag brands. Never once asking if anyone was truly happy. But that's okay. Tonight, I didn't need their questions, I just needed their eyes. Just once. To really see. And realize that the girl they thought would always be the poor little thing no longer sat at their table. She had left that room a long time ago, they just never noticed. Not until the necklace around my neck would bring everything to a halt, but that would come later. For now, I sat still, waiting for them to bury themselves in their own vanity. Because in the end, truth doesn't need to raise its voice. It only needs to exist sharp enough to cut through every illusion. I never forgot the year I turned 7, when my whole class buzzed with excitement over the entrance exam for a prestigious private school in the neighborhood. I rushed home holding the application form my teacher handed out, proudly showing it to my mother. But she barely glanced at it and said, "Public school is fine for you. Private schools are too expensive. We're saving that money for your sister's French lessons." I still remember standing in the middle of the living room, holding that form as it slowly crumpled in my hand, not understanding why I was already disqualified from a dream before I even had a chance to dream it. From that moment on, everything in our house seemed split into two compartments: one for your sister, the one who was invested in, expected of, celebrated, and one for me, the discounted spare. In high school, I earned a partial scholarship for an after-school tech program. I rushed home, eager, thinking maybe this time I'd be hugged. But my father only asked, "Will it make you money?" My mother looked at me. "Why not take a literature class like your sister, a girl who messes with machines all day, who's gonna love her?" That question followed me for years, who's gonna love her? As if my worth only existed if someone else chose to see it. But maybe that's why I became quieter, more persistent. I stayed up late learning code when the house was asleep. I hid finance books under the table at dinner. I learned to listen to the world without needing a guide. And then, I won a full scholarship to college on my own. No help. My mother only nodded, didn't say congratulations. She was busy taking my sister to try on her graduation dress. I remember my first day of college. No fancy suitcase, no car ride, not even a hug. I took the Greyhound bus alone, carrying a second-hand backpack and a folded-up dream tucked in a small notebook. At school, I studied while working part-time. Waitressing. Library shifts, tutoring. I carried food trays for families that looked just like mine, heads held high, turning their noses up at the smell of food, never meeting the eyes of their servers. Every time I washed a plate, I'd ask myself, if I stopped right now, who would speak up for me? No one. Because I wasn't the chosen child. And I stopped hoping to be chosen a long time ago. At home, they didn't call me a top tech student. They called me the one working at a restaurant. They laughed when I came home in my work uniform, told me, "Don't let the neighbors see you like that." My mother often told guests, "She's still struggling, but at least she's independent." It sounded like praise but felt more like an insult powdered in politeness. I just smiled and stayed silent. Then came the day of my sister's engagement. A grand event at a luxury hotel in the city center, where the entire extended family showed up like a royal reunion. I bought the simplest dress from H&M, saving for 3 months from my part-time jobs. I hoped it would at least look decent, appropriate. But as I stepped into the lobby, my sister gave me a single glance, then burst out laughing and pointed. "Do you even know this party has a dress code?" Her friends, perfectly trained in the art of social ridicule, followed her laughter like it was a synchronized performance. I stood there, like a blot of ink on a white silk canvas. No one pulled me out of that moment. No one spoke up for me. My mother even bowed slightly in front of everyone and apologized to my sister. "She's not used to these kinds of events. Please forgive her." I quietly left the party before the wedding cake was even cut. I didn't cry. I walked down the boulevard, past rows of expensive cars, past the glittering jewelry stores, and told myself, I don't need anyone to lift me up. I'll climb on my own. And one day, they'll have no choice but to look up. That night, I swore I would never let anyone make me feel small again. Not because I was poor, but because I finally understood. The most terrifying kind of poverty isn't the one in your wallet, it's the look in your family's eyes when they see you. Like you're a mistake, a blank space between their glittering achievements. But I'm no longer the blank space. I've started writing my life line by line with blood, sweat, and a burning resolve that refuses to be extinguished. I took my seat, last one at the table, near the edge, where the ceiling lights barely reached and no one really noticed. Like every year, the familiar seat of the one with nothing to show. No one asked me what I was doing these days, where I lived, if I had a boyfriend, or even if I'd eaten yet. They were too busy with their own stories, repeating the same strings of success and luxury in voices soaked in pride and smugness. My sister sat dead center at the table, the seat with the best visibility, designed to be noticed. She always knew how to choose her spot. A wine-red bodycon dress, flawless makeup, hair curled just right in that young madam style. The moment she saw I'd settled into my seat, she began her performance, deliberately and theatrically. "Oh, I haven't shown this off yet," she said loudly, raising her wrist to brush her hair back, revealing a diamond bracelet that sparkled under the chandelier. "My husband got it for our anniversary. Diamonds like this are rare. Triple excellent D color. Certified by GIA. The clink of a spoon against a glass came from Aunt High's side of the table, followed by a chorus of admiration. 75 grand and still looks understated, she said, eyes glimmering. Elegant, yet refined. My mother nodded in agreement, resting her hand on my sister's, her smile glowing with satisfaction. See, marrying well changes your fate. She used to be sensitive and moody, but now that she's got a successful husband, she's a different person altogether. I said nothing, my hands resting beneath the table, the cuff of my white shirt pulled neatly to my wrist. Around my neck, hidden under the collar, was something that once sent shockwaves through the financial world at a discreet auction, a limited edition diamond necklace from the private collection of Jacob and Company, valued at $59 million. But I said nothing. I didn't need to. It wasn't a weapon. It was a silent message, meant only for the right person, at the right time. My uncle jumped in right after that, as if unwilling to let all the admiration flow solely to my sister. He rolled up his sleeve, revealing a sparkling Swiss watch. I bought this during a business trip to Switzerland. Not too expensive, about 5 grand, but it's all about what it says. A man's watch speaks class. Not everyone knows how to pick the right one. Everyone nodded approvingly. I saw my mother glance at me, then quickly look away, almost as if embarrassed instead of proud. She had never said I possessed any kind of class. In her eyes, I was still the girl who takes the bus and quietly single. I took in a slow breath, not to react, but to steady the smile rising in my chest. Then I lifted my hand to my neck, pretending to fix my hair. Just a small motion. The collar of my shirt shifted slightly. A sliver of the diamond necklace peeked through the white fabric just enough to catch the light, just enough for the sharpest eyes to sense that something was off. My mother was the first to lift her head. She looked at the necklace, her expression frozen. 1 second. 2. Then her hand began to tremble slightly. That necklace, don't tell me. She never finished the sentence. Her voice broke apart like breath colliding with a memory too impossible to believe. The entire table turned to look at me. Eyes filled with curiosity, then disbelief, then silence, and then, like a slow-falling domino, my sister turned. She looked at me, then at the necklace, then into my eyes. Her lips parted, unable to stop the question from tumbling out. Is that the limited edition? From Jacob & Co. The Diamond Cascade line? That's the $59 million necklace? Silence. 1 second of it that stretched like a century. All spoon and fork sounds stopped. The clinking glasses fell still. No one laughed. No one gasped, "Oh my God," or "so elegant," like they had when my sister flaunted her bracelet. Not one person seemed equipped to process what they had just seen. I stayed seated, as naturally as if I were wearing a wool scarf. I simply smiled softly, faintly, and sharp enough to cut. "Oh, this?" I said, buttoning my collar back up. "It's just jewelry. I wear it for fun." I watched the confusion spread around the table like invisible smoke. My uncle instinctively rolled down his sleeve, hiding his watch. My sister's husband leaned in, whispering something into her ear, his face tense. My sister didn't say another word, only stared at me like she was trying to decipher an equation that no longer worked. My mother looked at me, her voice scattered, as if trying to pick up the shattered pieces of memory left by the explosion of truth now sitting at the center of the table. What is it you do? You still take the bus, don't you?" She emphasized bus like an accusation. As if real success could never be associated with public transportation. I set my water glass down on the table, my gaze not leaving hers. "I have executive offices in Palo Alto, New York, and Tokyo. Taking the bus is the only way I have time to review contracts while commuting. Because when you called me at 8 p.m. to ask why I hadn't phoned home more often, I was in a meeting with our partners in Japan. Because when the family was at the spa last weekend, I was pitching to an investment fund in Switzerland." My voice wasn't raised, wasn't shaky. It was steady like a cold blade sliding cleanly through. My cousin Kevin, the Goldman Sachs employee, finally spoke, trying to maintain the composure of someone from the industry. "So, what's your company about?" he asked, his hand resting on the table, smile thin, more probing than genuinely curious. I didn't blame him. He had grown up in a family that had always treated him as the golden one. I simply nodded, pulled out my phone, opened a document, and placed it in the center of the table. AI-driven financial market analysis platform. We develop high-speed trading systems that learn and adjust strategies based on real-time volatility. Actually, our system was signed by Goldman for pilot deployment last month. If you check your internal memo, it's in there. Kevin blinked. And I saw it in his eyes, that unmistakable fracture. Like something he believed to be absolute had just been erased without a trace. I opened another PDF file and zoomed in on the company's valuation chart and the most recent funding round. This report is from Excel Capital. Current valuation, $14.7 billion. No one said a word. Not a single gasp. Only stunned eyes frantically flipping through every memory they had of me, the quiet girl in plain clothes, the one who barely spoke, always a shadow in every holiday photo. My aunt, the one who once told my mother she should get married soon, with her personality, no one will want her, audibly swallowed. My mother's hand trembled as she reached out to touch my wrist, her eyes pleading for an explanation she was clearly unprepared to hear. Why would you hide this from the family?" she asked, her voice softening, nearly breaking into tears. I turned to her, my lips still smiling, but my eyes already cold. "Because every time I said I was good at something, You said, "Why do you always have to brag?" And when I stayed silent, you called me useless. I paused, letting the words sink deep into the air like ink seeping into cloth. So I chose silence. Because I realized, no matter what I do, this family will always find a way to twist it just enough to shrink it down to the size they're comfortable with. My sister cut in instantly, trying to reclaim the room. It must be fake. Who wears something like that to dinner? Probably borrowed. I looked her dead in the eye note with anger, not with bitterness. Just the gaze of someone who no longer needed approval. You can call Sotheby's to verify. The serial number is beneath the clasp. They sold it to me at an auction 3 months ago. I'm one of their VVIP clients. If you want, I can show you the maker's authentication code. I took a sip of water. But even if you still think it's fake, that's okay. Because even if it were real, you wouldn't understand its value. .com. My uncle, the one who had just been boasting about his walks, suddenly turned to Aunt Hi's husband and asked, "Hey, you ever heard of her company? Maybe we should invest a little, get in on some passive income?" The eyes around the table began shifting. Some looked at me like I was a golden goose, others like they were trying to calculate whether they'd missed a shortcut. My aunt tapped her chopsticks gently on her bowl and gave a forced chuckle. "So, are you opening another funding round anytime soon? Your uncle's got a few million lying around, might get a family discount, right?" I smiled and shook my head. "Sorry. The last round closed last month, oversubscribed by 4 billion. The waitlist stretches into next quarter. And we don't accept money from people who don't understand the product." That line cut deep. It sliced through every gaze that once assumed I'd need them one day. It sliced through every moment they diminished me to elevate someone else. It sliced through the illusion that all you had to do was show up with a family connection to get in through the back door. Kevin lowered his head, pulled out his phone, pretending to check email. Maybe he was searching for information about my company. Maybe he was texting his boss. Turns out we just invested in an AI platform run by my cousin. I didn't care. I turned to my mother, my voice gentle. "I didn't hide it to punish you. I just didn't want to force you to compliment something you never truly believed I was capable of doing." My mother held my hand. The same hand that once smoothed my hair when I had a fever, that once gripped mine tightly as she walked me to school. Now, it trembled in waves. "I'm sorry," she whispered. I didn't know." I gently squeezed her hand. "I didn't know either. But now I do. I know I don't need to be compared anymore, don't need to prove anything. I just need peace." And in that moment, the pain vanished. What I felt instead was calm. As if after all those years of being diminished, I could finally stand in the center of my own family and no longer bow my head. The air around the table hung heavy, thick, like everyone was trying to digest something far larger than the foie gras the restaurant had just served. No one said a word. A few eyes flicked toward the necklace at my throat, others exchanged glances, whispering in desperation, scrambling to reconstruct a hierarchy that, just minutes earlier, had seemed as solid as steel. But the only metal that remained now glistening under the chandelier were the diamonds around my neck, throwing sharp beams of light that sliced deep into each person's self-assured pride. I stood up. Said nothing. I didn't need to. The movement was graceful, as usual, but this time every pair of eyes followed it. I opened my handbag and pulled out a small black velvet box. No logo. No brand. Just a gift chosen from memoria memory where luxury never existed, but the things left unanswered remained forever etched. I extended the box to my mother. She flinched slightly, instinctively unsure whether she should feel joy or fear. She accepted it with both hands and carefully opened the lid. Inside was a pair of sapphire earrings, hand-set, crafted in vintage French style from the 1970s. She stared at them, her hands trembling. How did you know?" she asked. Her voice softer than ever, as if afraid the answer might shatter her. I sat back down across from her. My eyes weren't teary. I wasn't angry. I was simply placing truth on the table like sunlight. "Because I remembered," I said slowly. When I was 7, you once told the neighbor that you loved a pair of vintage French sapphire earrings, but we didn't have the money, so better to save it for your sister's French lessons. You didn't know I was standing behind the door. You didn't know I remembered it for over 20 years. I paused. I remembered. Even though you never once remembered what I needed. My mother's hand froze midair. Her eyes shimmered with something I had never seen on her face before. Real regret. For the first time, I no longer saw her as someone judging me. She was just a mother, standing in front of a memory she had long forgotten, now laid bare. I turned to my sister. She sat frozen, her lips pressed tight, eyes locked on me like she was desperately searching for a crack to breathe through. I smiled softly, not with spite, but with the kind of honesty that sunlight brings after a storm. You don't have to compete, sis. I'm not racing you anymore. I'm busy building my own empire. The entire table fell into silence. The jokes, the flattery, the endless talk of stocks, real estate, and luxury cars, all of it dissolved. In that moment, everyone understood. There are forms of power that don't need to shout, they only need to exist. I pulled out my phone. The screen lit up. An international call. I glanced at it briefly, then turned back to the table and spoke with the calmness of a news anchor. Excuse me, the CEO from Europe is calling. Our meeting on integrating banking data with the European market is about to begin. I stood and walked away from the table. No one stopped me. No one dared ask another question. The silence left behind was so complete it felt like every word they'd spoken before had been erased by the very silence they could no longer control. My mother stayed seated, the gift box still in her hands, eyes fixed on me. My sister didn't look anymore. She had her head bowed, suddenly very focused on a glass of water, whose ice had long since melted. Kevin looked down at his phone, his finger trembling slightly, maybe typing a message to a financial advisor, maybe Googling my company's name. But I didn't care. I walked out of the restaurant without looking back. The sunset poured across the boulevard like molten gold. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I needed to become someone. I already was. Not to be compared. Not to be accepted. But to shinny on my own terms, in a way no one had ever taught me. I put on my headphones, pressed play on a song, and answered the call. A voice came through in crisp, polished English. Are you ready for the board update, Miss Naomi? I smiled and replied softly. Yes, let's begin. And just like that, I stepped into my own world. A world where no one asked what I wore, what car I drove, or whether I had a boyfriend. Only numbers, strategy, and freedom, the kind of light no diamond could ever match. I walked out of the restaurant, my heels gliding across the marble floor as if I weren't touching the ground. The glass doors shut behind me, cutting through the lingering hum of whispers, unspoken questions, glances that never landed. No one followed me out, no one dared. My sister sat with her head down, shaken by the collapse of a world she used to rule. My uncles, aunts, cousins all frozen in place, as if any wrong word might make me turn back and unveil more truths they weren't ready to face. Only my mother stood at the door, saying nothing, clutching the black velvet box with both hands. The same hands that once brushed away a gift I gave her when I was 17. Now they held on tightly, as if afraid to let go. I looked at her for a long moment. I didn't blame her, and I didn't forgive her. It was just silence. At last, the bus arrived right on time, as always. I stepped on and sank into the seat by the window. Outside, the sky had turned a soft shade of violet. A gentle breeze drifted through the crack in the window, carrying the faint saltiness of the distant sea. The driver glanced at me in the rearview mirror, raised an eyebrow, then chuckled. Where you headed all dressed up? Just came back from a gala? I laughed. Not the polite kind. A real laugh, the kind that rises up after you've walked through a wall you once thought you'd never break through. I'm heading home, I said, because I don't need anyone to take me there anymore. The bus pulled out of the station, gliding smoothly through the glowing city streets. I leaned back against the seat, eyes on the window. Streetlights passed in streaks, trees swaying and falling behind like whispers. For a moment, I saw my sister standing behind the restaurant's glass wall, her gaze locked on me. The same eyes that once made me feel small, afraid, never enough. But this time, I felt nothing. No tremble. No ache. Just the emptiness that lives between two people who no longer have anything left to compete for. I had moved on. And she remained rooted in a world that still revolved around others' approval. I pulled out my phone and opened an old album. A blurry photo appeared me as a child, bangs cut straight across, trying on one of my mother's oversized bracelets. The shot was grainy, candid, but I still remembered exactly how I felt that moment. Thrilled, in awe, full of dreams. I remembered my mother tapping my head gently and saying with a chuckle, "Don't dream, that kind of thing isn't for you." I believed her, for a long time. As if the world was divided into two types of people, those allowed to dream, and those not. I swiped across the screen, then looked back out the window. Now, no one could stop me from dreaming. Not because I had money, but because I had proven my dreams never needed permission. The bus lights flickered as we turned onto the final stretch of road. A few new passengers climbed aboard, someone in a work uniform, someone carrying grocery bags, a young mother holding her child. No one looked at me, no one knew who I was. And that, to me, was the most beautiful piece. No expectations. No pressure. Just a woman on a bus, wearing a diamond necklace worth $59 million, who knew exactly what mattered. I closed my eyes, leaned my head against the glass, and whispered inside. Sometimes, silence is the loudest revenge. Sometimes, taking the bus doesn't mean you're poor. It means you're busy building an empire that will make others go silent. If your family ever made you feel small, if you've ever stayed quiet, endured everything, just so one day you could rise on your own, then this story is for you. Have you ever had a moment like hers? A moment where you didn't say a word, but the entire room fell silent? Share your story in the comments below. If this video touched something deep inside you, don't forget to like, share it with someone who's ever been